Salutations and fist bumps, folks. Welcome back to the Coding Shield. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started with Claude Code if you've never used it before and how to get the most out of it for the time that you're using it. So if you've never used Claude or Claude Code before, you want to go to Claude.ai, and this is going to bring you to the chat interface specifically. And then you want to go to the code area over here. And that's going to bring you to this startup area here if you've never installed this before. In my opinion, it's a good idea to install both the desktop app for your considered desktop. In this case, I'm using a Windows machine, but I'm using a Windows machine with Linux installed using WSL, by the way. And you should also have this installed inside of an editor as well. I'm going to show you how to install it inside of JetBrains because it's kind of involved. And I'm also going to show you how to install it inside of a VS Code fork of sorts. So that's anti-gravity, VS Code itself, Cursor, or Windsurf. In general, having the best experience with Claude Code is going to happen inside of the terminal, inside of somewhere that you could actually see what Claude is doing with your files so that you can audit it and make sure that it's doing what you want. So if you want to get started with installing Claude Code itself, you can go ahead and come to claude.com/product Claude Code. It's going to bring you to this or tell you to use this command. If you're using WSL like I am on a Windows machine, this may not work very well for you. So I'm going to suggest that you go to the documentation link, which is going to bring you to this link here and install it this way instead. This is actually going to be available, or at least it should be available for everyone using a Linux distribution. So curl should be available. If it's not, you want to install that first. And I'm going to hopefully remember to leave some instructions down below inside the documentation, or down inside the description, I should say, to if you don't know how to install that. In general, for the most part, you should be able to install this with this curl command right here. You can also install it with Homebrew as well. Now, before you actually try and use it, you can see that I was actually having some issues, and I asked Claude to help me figure out what was going on here. Because inside of WSL, this was something that I did not know. This is literally in real time. I found this out, that it may open up, or at least it has in the past, opened up a shell like this. So something that looks something similar to this black and white. It does work inside of JetBrains, but in terms of using it with the Claude Code IDE JetBrains plugin, has some issues. So to rectify those, I again asked Claude to help me figure out what was going on here. And what was happening was inside of the settings for JetBrains, inside the terminal, we have to set up, or at least by default, I should say, it points to bin/bash, which is okay. It does work. It will actually hit your WSL instance and actually will work. But for the use case with Claude, and specifically the Claude plugin, you're going to want to have WSL specifically loaded at the time that you are trying to use a terminal instance. So for this, you'll want to select WSL.exe- which stands for distribution, Ubuntu 24.04, which is the year that this was actually released, by the way. And then to make sure that it actually is using the correct terminal, you want to add these last few flags here, bash, -L, and which will basically tell this to explicitly log into and make an interactive terminal for you so that you can actually use the command that we need to use inside of our terminal, which after you have placed all this inside of here, this should open up and apply. I've already done it, so it's not going to show up for me. But then once you do that, go ahead and hit apply, and okay, you should be good. Now, if you want to go ahead and use a new terminal or new Claude Code instance, you should be able to say Claude, and it will say, hey, open up Claude Code and now install or do whatever you're trying to do. It will tell you, like I was hoping this was going to happen, it will tell you that Claude could not launch because of that same reason that I was talking about before, because it's pointing to, by default, it's pointing at the bin/bash area. And that's not where, or at least on my machine, and it possibly will be the same for you as well. If you're using a Windows machine specifically, if you're watching this video and you're using a Windows machine, this is why I'm going in so much detail here, because it's really involved. But if you're using a Windows machine using WSO and you're trying to use Linux, and you see that error that it says, hey, Claude is not installed on JetBrains, and you're using JetBrains IDE, this is the reason why. It's pointing at the wrong direction, and that's the way that you actually fix it. Let's move into VS Code and install it there. So obviously, inside of VS Code, you'll want to go to the extensions and then go to Claude Code and install that extension here. I'll go ahead and install it. And then now that you've installed it, you'll be able to open it on the side and actually look at what's going on, see what type of the files that it's moving and changing inside of your project and all that kind of stuff. Let's say I want to start a new session, and let me see, what project am I in right now? Let's say, for example, hey, Claude, can you tell me a little bit about this project, how it's set up, what the architecture is, and what can be improved if there are any features that need to be improved? And I'll go ahead and let that run. And then it's going to start working inside of my code base, figuring out what needs to happen, and make some changes if it needs to, all that kind of stuff. So as I'm working, this is basically how I would actually get stuff done inside of VS Code. And for my own personal situation, I actually go back and VS Code and JetBrains, because JetBrains does some things that I like. And so VS Code does give you access to this interface, whereas in JetBrains, you just have this terminal interface specifically, where this sometimes is a nicer way to work for me as a developer. You enjoy this way of working, though, and you want to actually see in your face how things are laid out and what's being read, what's being worked on, and all that kind of stuff, without having to look at a terminal. If the terminal scares you a little bit, then using VS Code would be a better way to work. Now, for now, I'm going to not do any of this right now, because I'm not reading what's going on. So I don't want to let it loose on my code base right now, because it's in a good place and I don't want that to go away. So, but what I want to show you next is things that you could add on to Claude Code that make your life a whole lot easier. So in this portion of the video, I'm going to be inside of the desktop version of Claude, which still is very close, or does allow me to be close to the things that I need to be close to in terms of skills and all that kind of stuff, and connect all of that inside of the projects that I'm going to be working in. So for the majority of projects, if not all projects, you're going to want to have a folder that has .claude inside of it, and then also skills that you can place all of your skills inside of here, where Claude is going to then pick those skills up locally for your particular project. You can also place, and this is something that is starting to become larger known across the community because of open source versions or open source harnesses like open code and stuff like that. But agents is another way or another place to install skills as well. But for Claude specifically, .claude is where you're going to want to install these skills here. So for me, I have these skills for this particular project. If I go inside of Claude here, you'll see that these skills aren't necessarily showing up because this is specific to that project. These skills that you see here are globally available for Claude to use. So if I want to have a global skill available, this is the best place to actually start it. So I'll say, let's create a skill, and I'll say, Claude, you create the skill. And I'll go ahead and continue. Let's create a skill together using your skill creator skill. First, ask me what the skill should do. So I'll go ahead and fire that off, and what it will do, what do I want to do? Let's see. Let's do check the remote for the given repo to make sure that a GitLab remote was connected. Just to simple thing here. Got it. Got the skill. Should be creating that. And then it's asking more questions. So skill that checks whether a Git repo has a GitLab remote connected. Let me make sure I understand the scope before drafting. A few quick questions. What counts as connected? Just remote pointing to a GitLab URL, yada, yada, yada. Which GitLab? What should Claude do if it's missing? Multiple remotes? What should we do with that? Trigger phases and all that kind of stuff if I was going to actually set this up. So this is something I'm actually going to do. I'm not going to do it now because it's going to take a little bit more time and more time than I want to bore you guys with actually setting this stuff up. But if you do want to see a full setup video on this specifically, on skills and all that kind of stuff, leave that down in the comment section. I'd love to understand what you guys want to see more. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about and make sure that you understand before we leave this video is plugins, and specifically the three plugins that I'm going to talk about in this video will be Superpowers, Console 7, and Playwright. Now, if you've never seen these plugins before, Playwright, I'll start with that. Now, the first plugin that I want to talk about is Playwright. Playwright is a browser automation end-to-end testing MCP server that allows you to interact with the browser, go ahead and do sensitive information. So for example, for me, if I'm actually working on a project right now that will go into my Marvel login and read comics for me so that I can read those comics, understand what's going on, or if I'm on a go or something like that, I can say, hey, give me a quick synopsis about a comic, or specifically a specific comic that just came out. In order to install it, you're going to go ahead and grab the code or the copy of the code that is right here. Then you'll want to go to a regular terminal. So I'm going to bring that up inside of JetBrains, inside of WebStorm. Bring up a regular terminal. If you're inside a regular terminal specifically, this is all you're going to need. And then you want to go ahead and place that inside of this Claude Code plugin command inside your terminal. Go ahead and install it. And if I go ahead back into Claude here and say plugin, and now I should see these plugins that are available for me. So if I want to install this directly so if I'm discovering this, I could go directly from Claude Code, but I could also tab over and see what's already installed for me as well. So for me, I have these that are installed or that can be installed with Claude Code. They just have to be connected, it looks like, connected with authentication. But the one that I have already installed would be Playwright, which is this one right here. If I'm looking for a particular plugin, I can use the inline direct plugin browser inside of Claude Code, which gives me these at a glance. There's also a marketplace available as well. And then you can also use Claude, the desktop version, that will give you access to the same plugins. But when I tried to find Playwright, it doesn't come up. So I don't know exactly what's going on there. If there's something that recently changed, even in the connectors, I couldn't find it there either. So if I say Playwright here, nothing, I get absolutely nothing, but you can see that you do have access to Playwright. It's right here. So Playwright, like I said, that's going to allow you to use or do browser automation. Another skill or another plugin that I would advise you to connect would be the GitHub or GitLab. I use GitLab specifically. So I use GitLab specifically, but if you're using GitHub, you'll want to install this official plugin here, which will then ask you for some authentication that you're going to need to install. I don't actually have that installed yet inside of this. So for me, I would go with the GitLab version of this. So I need to install this guy here. It will more than likely ask me to connect some authentication. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on screen now. I do want to install this for me, install for me and collaborators. I'll just go with user scope because it's just going to be me anyway, at least for now. And that should be all good to go. GitLab. If I go ahead and say reload plugins and /plugin, should get my installed GitLab plugin, and I can mark that as a favorite or what have you. Let's see. Will it show up inside of here is the great question I have. GitLab, no. I don't understand why that's not connected here. That is odd. I'm going to have to do some more research on why that is not necessarily connected inside of these in terms of plugins and all that kind of stuff. But to actually use them, if I were to need to connect with my GitLab, let's say, hey, Claude, let's not do that. Let's do, hey, Claude, can you tell me the open issues that are available for this project? Now, this actually brought up, for me at least, a redirect issue that I then, as you could probably guess, I then threw that back to Claude and said, hey, this is not exactly, that URL that you gave me is not exactly what it should have been. What's going on? And it then told me that I need to, obviously, because my repos are all private, I need to authenticate using either the GitHub or GitHub CLI, which is probably the easiest way to do it. So I forgot that you will have to have Homebrew installed in order to install GLab. For this case and purpose, I'm going to suggest looking into, if you're using Windows Subsystem for Linux, WSL, go ahead and install Brew. It's just going to be easier. I'm going to go ahead and install with Brew, and I'll bring that over here. Come on. In order to do that, you'll want to go to this page here, docs.brew.sh. Once you do then install Brew for WSL, you should then get instructions that run, or that tell you to run some specific instructions. This will be the first one. Then these are optional. So the main one that you need to have available or need to make sure that you run is this one right here. If you don't run that, then you won't be able to use Brew at all inside of any of your terminals. So if we want to do all the rest of these things, you can, but you don't have to. I did because I'm going to need it long term anyway. So I just did it. But I did that off camera. From here, what we should be able to do is grab another. Let me just make sure that it does work. Yay. Okay. And then I need to go back to Claude Code. It says I need to do all that stuff, but I really just need to do this guy right here. And yay, we should be good. I'm already authenticated with my account, so I'm not going to re-authenticate, although I could, but I'm not. But then this will then allow me, or at least it should allow me to say, do I need to do this? No, not necessarily. I don't need to do this again because we already have it. So let's see. Already authed, please continue and show me the issues. I'll say yes. And now that after a little bit of time and some looking through some stuff to find what it needed, it did find out that I did have some open issues that are pertaining to this particular project that I'm working on that need to be cleaned up. But I'll work on those later on. I won't do those inside of this video. That will be a separate video. But that now shows you how to get started with GLab, or get started with GitLab specifically. Now, the next plugin that I want to discuss is the Context 7 MCP server, or Context 7 plugin, which again, if you have been using agentic coding tools, you may have seen that it does give you code that is 2 years old or something like that, that is now deprecated or something. And in order to give it fresh documentation, this is what you want to use. Context 7 is going to allow you to give all of your projects up-to-date documentation for the tools that you're using to work and build with. If you don't give it this, it won't have proper context using the tools that you actually are using. Case in point, for me specifically, I'm actually building let me see if I can grab this really quick. Puck, where are you? There we go. Puck editor, that's what it is. .com. So I'm using the Puck editor to build a web page editor of sorts. And inside of the documentation, you can see that, where is it? Where's the version? Overview version. I know that this is on version 21 or 0.21 at this point. If I go inside of package.json and look for the Puck editor. I know that it is looking for 21.2. So for me, that's what I was looking for it to install. Instead, it installed for the first time, and I can't, at least I would have to go back and look through all my commits, and I don't exactly remember which one it was because it's a long time ago since I started this. At least it feels like it. It gave me the previous version that was like 0.20, I think it was. So it was giving me things that were completely different, that were completely updated. Now it was using stuff that's no longer being used inside the documentation anymore. So in order to keep that stuff from happening, adding in context 7 is going to make sure that all of your documentation is up to date as much as possible. So you want that in all your projects going forward. Okay, so that was a lot to cover. I hope that was informative as much as I possibly could be. I'm sure that there was things that I left out. I'm sure that there are things that I could have gone deeper into. If there are things that you want to see more of and want a deeper dive on in terms of how to use skills and how to use plugins and how to specifically work with agentic AI and code harnesses and all that kind of stuff, leave that down in the comments. I am now on this bandwagon. I was kind of off of it for the last 2 years, but I started using agentic coding tools and found out that I get so much time back inside of my day to spend with my daughter, my son, my wife, to go to Comic-Cons and do the things that I actually love doing. I love programming, don't get me wrong, but I would rather spend my time with the people that I love. And that's the reason why I started this channel in the first place, because we're going to be starting to try and find ways to use code and automation to buy back time inside of my life or our lives as a community. So if you want to be a part of that community, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And until next time, y'all be smooth. Blurt out.